Not at all should we soft sell or justify Counsell going to the Chicago Cubs. Yeah, we're all angry about it. We should be, and disappointed and all that. And business is business. I get it. But Mark Attanasio said, I don't know about that. We'll get into that. What's next for the Milwaukee Brewers? The chatter has not died down with Counsell going to the Chicago Cubs. All that and more coming up on this edition of Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, anger, there's a lot of it out there regarding Counsell going to the Chicago Cubs, but I think we're going to be okay. I think, it's easy to overreact and get angry and all that, and I get all of that. I certainly do, especially when a hometown guy goes to a hated rival. And I'm telling you what, these Cubs fans who are tweeting at me, God, that really fires me up. Good to have you along. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day, covering our favorite team, the Milwaukee Brewers. We are with you every day. Follow us along Google, Spotify, Apple, all the major downloads. And, of course, get us on YouTube, our growing YouTube page. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Brewers. You'll find us there. Hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. It'll alert you every time we drop an episode here on Locked On Brewers. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. That's easy. That's $150 if your team wins. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started today. All right. Getting started here on Locked On Brewers. Yeah, some of the anger, the whoever that was, I'm not even going to say that was a fan who destroyed Craig Counsell field sign and what he did for Whitefish Bay in that community. Wrong. I don't even know if that was a fan. I don't know if that guy who even did that could even name 10 Milwaukee Brewers and was looking for an excuse for what he did, but that is wrong. I was sad to see that, and it better end right there because we don't need to go. That's unnecessary, and that's not a fan. That is not a fan. That's somebody looking for an excuse to do something bad, and that is wrong. And I think everybody would agree with me on that. Now, as far as Counsell going to the Cubs, yeah, there's a lot of people. There are some people trying to justify it. I came here on the show yesterday trying to justify and understand why he would go to the Cubs. And then I read certain things like today, Sports Illustrated reporting that the Cubs were always his dream job, from a source that the Cubs were always his dream job. Now, that would be in contrast to what we know about Craig Counsell, that he bleeds Milwaukee Brewers and all that. But when he says his dream job, okay, Counsell comes, he's 53. So growing up, Counsell always knew of the Cubs. The Cubs were at one time, were not a rival. They were not the White Sox were the hated team because the Brewers and the White Sox were the American League. Had this been in the 70s and 80s and Counsell had gone to the White Sox, then there'd be anger. If he had gone to the Cubs, if Counsell had left for the Cubs in the 80s and he was managing the Brewers, let's say he was the manager of the 82 Brewers and he went to the Cubs, nobody would have, we would have cared, but there wouldn't have been the anger. But since the Cubs now are in the Brewers division and we got this dislike for those Cub fans coming up and trying to take over our ballpark and many other reasons why, yes, it does sting. It does hurt. It does hurt tremendously. It does. I get that. But when I read where that the Cubs have always been his dream job, well, that's probably, he grew up in a different era where the Cubs were not a threat to the Brewers and Cub fans didn't come up here because the Brewers didn't face the Cubs until like the late 90s when we started interleague play. And then the Brewers eventually moved to the National League. But we're hearing that also reports that the Mets were not willing to go $8 million on Counsell. Counsell wanted $8 million. The Mets were not willing to go that high. But apparently the Cubs were. Just a little sneaky the way the Cubs did this. They waited until November 1st, snuck in, so they wouldn't have to ask permission from the Milwaukee Brewers. And while they already had a manager, met with Craig Counsell in secret quarters and made the managerial switch. I wish that didn't work out. I wish, if anything, he had gone to the Mets. And then the Cubs had to go back and pretend nothing ever happened with David Ross and explain to him when reports came out how Counsell interviewed for the job and how everybody would lie and disagree that it would ever happen, that it never happened. So yeah, if anything, I wish he would have taken the Mets job. So the Cubs would have been caught in a tough situation. It's not going to work out for the Cubs anyway. Here's how it always is with Chicago sports teams. Okay. They go out and make this. When they went out and got Julius Peppers, Chicago Sports Radio, some of those blowhards down there. Oh, this is the final piece to get us to the Super Bowl. We're going to win a Super Bowl championship now. First time since 1985. And the Cubs have done, when they got Joe Madden. Well, Joe Madden did get them to the World Series and 3 times to the League Championship Series. So yeah, but most of the time it ends in failure for the Chicago Cubs and Chicago franchises. Okay, but this is a move like when they did get Joe Madden from Tampa, and Joe did lead him. But the only problem is Joe had tremendous success in Tampa, tremendous success. Counsell didn't quite have that success. Okay, postseason. You look at having lost 9 of his last 10 games, and I'm not justifying, losing Counsell at all, because he still is the best choice out there. Now, if the Brewers go on and win the National League Central, we're going to look at it. We didn't need Craig Counsell. Didn't need him. Sometimes when you lose a player, it's like when the Brewers lost Prince Fielder. Yeah, they lost their power-hitting first baseman. But did he really go on and do great things elsewhere? His career ended short. Okay? Sometimes you lose guys like this. Paul Molitor. I put this on. The Brewers lost Paul Molitor back in 1993, almost 30 years ago. And that one stung. To me, that one stings worse than this. It does. Molitor to the Blue Jays stings way worse than this. Some of you weren't around then. I get that. But it stings because it happened overnight. And he went to the rival Blue Jays. The Brewers and Blue Jays were rivals in the American League East at the time. And they were battling for division titles. And the Brewers could never overtake Toronto. And then Molitor, our best player, Hall of Famer, goes to the Blue Jays. And this, some of you guys though who are hating the fact that Counsell is going to the Cubs have been trashing him all year. I've been trashing him for 5 years. Yeah, do I see eye to eye of everything he does? No, but he is a good manager, and he deserves Manager of the Year over the other candidates. He is the Manager of the Year in the National League. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, it hurts. We're going to move on. We're going to get a good manager, and we're going to go from there. We'll talk about a little bit later on who some of those candidates could be, because it sounds like they're trying to stack these up. But what Mark Attanasio said was wrong. His statement, totally wrong. We'll get to that coming up next year. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. And FanDuel, man, sports betting season. Is there a better time than right now to get in on all the action with all the sports going on, everything going on? College basketball starting up. You got some day games as well. Score early in the NFL season with FanDuel, America's number one sports book. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. That's $150 if your team wins. Easy to win a $5 money line bet, and you're going to get your bonus bets of $150. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, getting in on the action right now, there's no better time to get on the action with everything going up. NBA underway, college basketball starting. November is one of my favorite months for sports. With Thanksgiving weekend coming up as well, is there a better time to bet on sports than right now? Thanksgiving weekend, you got college basketball, you got college football, you got everything going on. And with FanDuel, it's easy. The app is so easy to use. Wide range of betting options, spreads, player props, over and unders, all that on FanDuel.com/locked-on right now. Again, FanDuel.com/locked-on. Put that in. Put locked on, tag that, because the new customers out there $150 of bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So visit FanDuel, FanDuel.com/lockdown. Kick off the NFL season, right? We're, 8-9 weeks into the season so far. College football, we're getting into the thick of things on Saturday. And I said college hoops starting as well. And hockey as well. We're underway with that. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. We're coming right back after this here on Locked On Brewers. Welcome back to Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, your host. Good to have you along here. Thank you, everybody. Our downloads yesterday on this podcast, off the charts. Both on YouTube, the subscriptions, free subscriptions, by the way. They're all free. I mean, it doesn't cost you any money. And then the audio downloads, Apple, Spotify, just blew it up. And, and that's because, the Brewer fans, we're passionate. We love our team, and we don't like to see bad things happen to our team. But Mark Attanasio, some of the things that he said yesterday, said he didn't feel betrayed. I guess I would have been felt betrayed if I was him. But, he was part of Attanasio went on to talk about how Craig, it was basically was a slap in the face to the community. What Craig said, he's the community supported him, we're behind him and all that. And it was he basically said it was a slap in the face to the city of Milwaukee. Again, this is a business deal. Mark Attanasio, he shouldn't have said that. And maybe I'm taking it out of context, but it sounds like sour grapes. And if anybody, Mark Attanasio, knows about business, maybe he should have been more proactive on this whole thing. He could have been more proactive. He could have just said at the end of October, when his contract expired, he could have started interviewing managers, potential candidates. He didn't do this. Apparently Stephen Vogt was on their radar. Okay. Why didn't he go out along with the general manager, Matt Arnold, and start interviewing candidates? They waited around for Craig Counsell. Why did you wait? Why did you wait? If Vogt was going to be one of your candidates, it sounds like it was, why did you wait? Why did you move on? You waited and you got burned. Mark Attanasio should know that. He should know that. His comment, we lost Craig, but Craig has lost us, and he's lost our community. So he's putting it on Craig. He's putting the blame on Craig, okay? You know what? If you should have done your due diligence. That's where no one's talking about this, but Mark Attanasio, this is where he blew it. Now, if he would have matched the $8 million, he wouldn't talk about that, which I would have said he probably wouldn't have matched at $8 million. The Mets certainly weren't. If the Mets weren't with David Stearns, Mark Attanasio was not going to match it. And he's not going to come out and say, he had a little meeting with the media yesterday. He was not going to say, well, yeah, we were not going to match the $8 million, because this is going to be, that would be one more dart for Brewers fans to throw at him, because people already talk about him being cheap. Okay. And it comes down to all the resources. Like I said yesterday, it's a major league problem. But Mark Attanasio should not have said these comments. I disagree with those comments. We lost Craig, but Craig has lost us, and he's lost our community. Yeah, but he shouldn't have said it. You shouldn't have said it. You know what? You should have moved on. When his contract expired, you needed to go out there and interview candidates. We have a managerial opening as of November 1st when Craig Counsell's position ended. The Cubs were proactive. The Cubs didn't even have an opening, and they were proactive. Okay? And it's like, now what? Now what do we do? Well, one of our managerial candidates, maybe Mendoza, the manager, the guy who signed with the Mets, although he's probably ticketed to the Mets anyway, maybe he could have been a candidate as well. I don't know. But why would you choose the Brewers over the New York Mets? I just thought those comments by Mark Attanasio were wrong. But apparently Attanasio said Craig told him in early September that he was going to explore other options. If Craig was like, okay, September, we're in a pennant race. He wanted to blow this off during the season, talking about it. Well, I'm concentrating on my team. And Attanasio did say the two agreed to talk after the season. But how did that ever come up in September? Did Mark Attanasio just come up to him and say, Craig, by the way, it's Labor Day weekend. Are you coming back next year? What about this? Are you coming back? And then Counsell apparently told him, well, I'm going to explore my options out there. Okay. Wonder how that conversation came up if Counsell was so focused on September. But anyway, yeah, they lost the manager. They've lost their manager. The Cubs hiring him as it got that Madden feel to it. It just does. It does. And you know what? The Cubs had to tell him too that they're going to do some things in the offseason to make things better. The Ricketts family, obviously, he met with them. There's no doubt about that. But all this happened on a Monday phone call. How much do you want? $40 million over 5 years. Sold. No doubt in my mind it had to be some sort of face-to-face there. That cannot happen in the span of an hour, a short little phone call. There's no doubt about that. All right, we come back. Who are some of the options out there for the Milwaukee Brewers? Who could they be? Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Thank you, all your everydayers, for joining me always here on Locked On Brewers. Find me on Twitter. Some of you guys have. Maybe some of you haven't. Chuck Freeman, FREIMUND. And thanks for all the follows and the continued support of Locked On Brewers. It's going to be a busy offseason. There's things I wanted to talk about this week, but this is taking precedent. We'll get to that. We'll get to more of this and possible candidates next here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Welcome back to Locked On Brewers. I don't remember my Twitter blowing up as much ever. Not for bucks. Well, you know what? Maybe in 2021 when the Bucks had got down 0-2 to Phoenix. Maybe then. But I look at my timeline and it just blows up of people responding regarding Craig Counsell. And most of it is anger. Most of it is anger toward him. I mean, even now, I just started the show 15 minutes into it, and I got 7 more responses on this of people just writing and wanting to know. Gary says, why didn't Mark Attanasio try to extend his contract this time last year? He did try to extend his contract last year. Counsell was the one who did not want to extend the contract for whatever reason. And at the time, the first thoughts were that he wanted to spend some time. He wanted to retire, well, so-called retire, temporary retirement. He was 52 at the time, and see his kids play college baseball, both in Minnesota and Michigan, and maybe watch his daughters play their high school sports at Whitefish Bay. And obviously that was a factor in him staying in the Midwest. Apparently the reports are that he wanted to stay in the Midwest. He wanted to be close to them. So this was a perfect fit for him and a high profile job. Where else in the Midwest was he going to go? Not going up to Minnesota. Okay. They're not parting ways with their manager anytime soon. Not going to St. Louis. But what if if he went to the Cardinals, I think that might have angered me more than him going to the Cubs, because the Cardinals are a team I dislike more than the Cubs. The Cubs, I don't like their fans. I liked the Cubs when they were lovable losers. I loved them more so when they were lovable losers. Now, since in the last 10 years or so, they got this Cub fan arrogance that I don't like. Pack Fanatic says, agree. Although it's not like the Molitor situation where they gave him a low ball offer below market value. The Brewers offered Counsell top dollar. We don't know if they offered him $8 million. And yeah, the Brewers did give Molitor a low ball offer. I guess the pain on that was, I wasn't so much talking about the contract with Molitor leaving. It was him leaving for a rival, the Toronto Blue Jays at the time. Pack Fanatic also says this is not Attanasio's fault. He's playing with limited revenue, which I suggest. This was always Counsell's decision to make, Chuck. The Brewers made him an offer meeting his salary demands. Apparently not enough, though. Apparently not enough. Birdman says this is something you cannot say. They didn't even have a chance to match the offer. They were never going to match $8 million a year. The Brewers weren't. Travis says, I think he was gone no matter what. Yep. Hey, the New York Mets, the Cubs come calling. As much as we are Brewer fans, can't hold a candle to them, can we? As far as resources. Attanasio spent $11 million to increase his stake at a soccer team in September. If he actually wanted to keep Counsell, it could have been done. Again, these guys have budgets too. These small market owners, some of these rich, these millionaires, they're millionaires for a reason because they know how to spend their money. Learned that one a long time ago. MJ says they spoke to him all year. He made the decision to leave a long time ago. You're right on that, I think. I just think he was always going to go. I think he was always going to go. The Cubs, I don't know how that snuck in, and maybe someday we'll find out how the Cubs came in at the last hour. Was there contact between the Cubs and Counsell at all during the season? I find it hard to believe. I do find it hard to believe that there wasn't some sort of tampering. Well, heard it from a friend, some tampering. There's no way Jed Hoyer called him up on Monday, November 1st, or whenever Monday was. Monday was November. There's no way they called him up Monday and said, by the way, Craig, how would you like to be our manager? There had to be something going on before November 1st, which was last week, that there was interest from the Cubs that they wanted Counsell as a manager. I refuse to believe that this all came down within an hour's time. I mean, don't take us for idiots on that. There was some feelers out there somewhere down the line, I believe. Somewhere even during the season. That's how this stuff happens. Maybe not direct contact. That's how, this is how this happens in college sports all the time. Oh, I'd never talked to that guy. I never talked to Alabama. The next thing you know, he's sitting down at a press conference. Funny how that works. No, I never talked to such and such university. Then one day after his team is eliminated from the NCAA basketball tournament, he's sitting down at a press conference at a much bigger school. Funny how that all comes together like that quickly, doesn't it? Real weird. And by the way, Counsell's going to have a press conference in Chicago, probably Wrigley Field, next week sometime, it sounds. He will have a press conference at Wrigley Field. He will have something done. Future candidates. Apparently, according to some reports out there, Murphy interviewed for the Brewers job today. The Cubs are obviously also interested in him joining Counsell on the bench. Obviously, it's Counsell's choice there. I would think Counsell would told the Cubs, hey, if I'm going to take this job, I want to be able to have my own coaching staff. We'll see if he takes Chris Hook. A lot of you guys want to keep Chris Hook, and I get that. Will Chris Hook be the pitching coach? Now, when the new manager comes in, he can select his own coaching staff as well. Unless the GM says, well, if you're going to be our manager, this is how you're going to have to take this guy as your coach. And I don't like how that is. If you're the manager, you should be able to select your staff, just like Counsell, I'm sure, is going to be able to do in Chicago. They shouldn't be able to tell you who's on your staff. They shouldn't at all be able to tell you who's on your staff. And we saw it happen, how it happened with the Milwaukee Bucks. I think they told Griffin, hey, you're hiring Terry Stotts. He didn't even know Terry Stotts and hired him. And, a few days later, they parted ways. Don Mattingly, heard his name floated out there. The Florida, he did some nice things to the Marlins. Then it was time for him to go. But is Don Mattingly a Milwaukee guy? He's a Yankee. He's a big market guy. I don't look at Don Mattingly fitting into the Brewers situation. Don't see that happening at all. Mark Kotsay is the guy who I'm interested in. Would have loved Stephen Vogt. Had Mark Attanasio done his due diligence and interviewed some of these guys or put out feelers when November 1st went around, and Philly, instead, he waited for Counsell to make his decision. What a bad business move that was. That's where Attanasio is to blame. He should have done his due diligence on who his next manager was. And as a result, if he wanted vote, he's gone now to the Cleveland Guardians. That's going to do it for the show today. Hang in there, Brewer fans. This is a continuing fluid story. Obviously, we're going to know more. We know more all the time about what's going on with how this all went down. I don't like it either way. You don't like it either way, but it happened. And it's time to move on. And yeah, the Brewers have gotten worse since the season ended. But plenty of off season. There's free agency. There's news to be had. This team has just got to get better in the off season. Either way, this team had to get better in the off season, whether Counsell was coming back or not. And it's all about the Jimmies and the Joes, as we always say, and that is the players on the field. I really believe that. Yeah, the Brewers lost their manager, but it really is about the guys on the field. And who knows, with the new manager coming in, will Christian Yelich still be batting a leadoff? Get him out of the leadoff spot for crying out loud. I'm tired of seeing him in the leadoff spot. We'll come right back tomorrow, everybody. Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Thank you, everybody. Download us on Google, Spotify, Apple, all the major downloads, YouTube as well. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and follow me on Twitter, Chuck Freeman, Freimund. Back tomorrow, everybody. So long.